The United States immigration laws are very complicated and difficult to navigate for many people from other countries. Over the course of my career, I focused some on migration from Central America, El Salvador and Guatemala, and also Mexico. There are many immigrants, both documented and undocumented, who come to the United States from Mexico and Central America. In fact, today, roughly 20% of the legal immigrants to the United States come from Mexico, and about 55 or 60% of the undocumented population comes from Mexico. When it comes to people deported from the United States, people who are subjected to immigration enforcement measures, we see a large number of people, immigrants from Mexico affected, and also a large number of people from Guatemala and El Salvador affected by the enforcement of the immigration laws. Recently, there was a large-scale workplace raid in a place called Postville, Iowa, at a meat processing plant, and a good 95% of the people who were arrested, and some of them who were ultimately deported, were from Mexico or Guatemala. So our immigration laws have a dramatic impact on people from Mexico and Central America, and have been criticized for having too tough an impact on people from those regions. In the 1980s, it's probably worth telling you a little bit of history. In the 1980s, there's a fairly large migration from El Salvador and Guatemala to the United States. In part, it was a reaction to civil wars that were ongoing in those countries. And rather than embrace these refugees from civil wars with open arms, the United States government, that then was headed by President Ronald Reagan, took a relatively hard line when it came to asylum seekers from Central America. He focused primarily on ways of limiting the numbers of people coming from Central America as opposed to opening the doors to people from Central America. And the big concern, I think, among the administration and also among many people was that there was going to be a flood of relatively poor migrants to the United States that the country could not assimilate or integrate into the economy and social structure. So what was done in the 1980s was that when people from El Salvador and Guatemala came to the United States and they were arrested, they were subjected to detention. And if they wanted to pursue claims for asylum, which are possible to pursue under American law, they could, but they had to remain in detention while doing so. One of the problems or the issues with detention was that the Salvadorans and Guatemalans who were arrested were kept in detention camps in places like El Centro, California, and Florence, Arizona. Those are fairly remote locations where it was not possible for many of them to retain counsel because there weren't attorneys who were able to represent these people in their asylum cases. And if, in the American system, in immigration, if you can't afford an attorney, you don't get one. You may be able to get one to represent you free of charge, and if you can do that, you can be represented. If you can pay for one, you can be represented, but the government does not provide to any immigrant an attorney free of charge. And so many people, rather than pursuing their rights, decided to forego their rights to apply for asylum. They were in detention. They had no end in sight to their detention, and they decided that they were going to forego any rights they had to pursue asylum and stay in the United States. Many people harshly criticized this policy, said it was just too tough, and that we should be more generous toward these asylum seekers. And there were some signs of generosity in the 1990s. There was something called temporary protected status for Salvadorans, where Salvadorans in the United States were allowed to stay temporarily. Many stayed longer than temporarily and became parts of our society, and for the better, I think. But we have sort of a checkered history when it comes to our asylum laws, and in particular the treatment of people from Central America. Today, one of the biggest issues that we're facing in the United States is the issue of undocumented migration, and a concern among many sectors of the public and some politicians with the size of the undocumented immigrant population in the United States. And let me explain briefly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about undocumented immigration. We have fairly strict immigration laws. We focus on enforcement of those immigration laws. And for some groups of people, there's very limited ways that they can come lawfully to the United States. And so some people either come on temporary visas, on a business visa, for example, or tourist visa, and decide to stay longer than their visa would permit and stay in the United States. That's one group of undocumented immigrants, people who entered legally and then overstayed their visas. Another category of undocumented immigrants are people who entered the country unlawfully, who didn't stop at a border point, didn't stop at a port of entry, but somehow snuck into the United States, maybe by walking across the desert, maybe by going in the trunk of a car, maybe by stowing away in a ship or something like that. We have sort of two components of our undocumented immigrant population: the visa overstays and then the people who entered without inspection. But however they came, we have an estimated 12 million undocumented immigrants who live and work in the United States. And then the question is, well, what should we do as a nation with a large number of people living sort of off the books? Now, some people think that we need some kind of amnesty or legalization program. We have workers who came, they're working, they're contributing members of our society, so long as they don't have a problem with the law in terms of criminal law. Some people would say we should legalize them, grant them an amnesty, make them lawful permanent residents or legal immigrants. Other people would say, no, these are illegal. People have violated the law and they should be deported. They should be deported quickly because we don't want to reward law breaking. And there's sort of a very, very vociferous debate among the American public, among political leaders, about what we should do with these 12 million people. Legalize them or try to deport them. And I think as a practical matter, what will likely happen is that we are going to, as a nation, continue some deportation efforts, continue to try to deport some of the undocumented immigrants who live in this country. But at some point in the very near future, we as a nation will look very carefully at comprehensive immigration reform. We need to change our immigration laws, make them a little bit more realistic. And when we do so, we have to account for the fact that many people come here to work in the United States. We have to come up with a system that permits them to come here and work legally.